Good morning everyone and welcome to another class as part of the course on film appreciation. For today's class we turn our attention to the action cinema, a very popular genre for many of us. Although Hollywood genres are not watertight, the heroes or hero of an action film are put through various physically demanding challenges and perform physical feats typically involving violence, fighting sequences and chases. This is action cinema has always been extremely popular. Okay. It is one of the safest genres all over the world and it is a rare movie. You also have the genre of the so called B cinema, the B grade films. Okay. So, if you can't make a high budget film, there is always a scope or opportunity to make a B class, B grade movie, the so called B film, which will do extremely well in certain pockets. Okay. And it is true, it's a universally accepted fact. The physical bodies of the hero especially and also the other characters is put through a risk infused environment and is subjected to forces that try to push it out of that environment. This is important to remember in action cinema. The resulting battle and the triumph and the fantasies of empowerment are physicalized in characters of action cinema. One of the greatest films and earliest examples of this was The Great Train Robbery, released in 1903, which is considered to be the first action film. It's a very short film, but it has a distinction of being the first narrative film, a complete film. Okay, as you know, cinema was still in its early stages. You had the short features by the Lumiere brothers and Georges Méliès, but a full-fledged narrative film, however short it may be, was The Great Train Robbery, which had a narrative. But as time passed, action cinema tended to take a more larger than life image where the hero is a one-man army. That's the time we are living in nowadays, but this reached its peak in the 70s. Okay, think of the Dirty Harry movies starring Clint Eastwood and think of our own cinema starring Amitabh Bachchan, hero as a one-man army, and this phenomenon reached its pinnacle in the 80s with the films of Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Van Damme. The type of action films moved from the cowboy films, especially in Hollywood, to war adventures like The Guns of Navarone, to James Bond movies of the 60s, which present the resourceful hero. Some of the early action heroes include John Wayne, Steve McQueen, the great Steve McQueen, and I suggest that you should watch some of his movies like Bullet. Bullet is important, and also The Great Escape. And actors also actors like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Clint Eastwood, they became very popular in the 70s. Bruce Lee of course was the ultimate in Hong Kong martial arts cinema, and his brand of cinema also became very popular worldwide. With time, action movies became more nuanced and more subcultures emerged. In the Lethal Weapon series, Mel Gibson and Danny Glover popularized the buddy cop cinema, where Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee were pioneers in the martial arts cinema. Given the importance of creating an audio visual spectacle, a combination of economic incentives and artistic imperatives drive filmmakers to create a certain wow factor in action films. It is therefore important to create a sensory experience that is beyond the everyday experience, that is spectacle for spectacle's sake. Rather than be an antithesis to a narrative, it is suggested that action sequence could aid in taking the narrative forward. In action films, the work of the body is constantly, the image of the body is constantly in focus, and filmmakers use rapid editing as a device, and also close-up shots of the face and body. Wide-ranging camera movements of the action films are intensified using these devices. So, the action audience are not passive spectators, but in the case of cinema, action cinema, they are active, and I use it in quotations, participants who are responding to the on screen stimuli. While visuals are an important component to action cinema, the auditory sense is also constantly used to enhance the action experience. Apart from explosions and gunshots, background music too plays an important role in the setting the mood, pacing the film, etc. And the soundtracks are not used to offer the real bodies, but represent heroic idealized bodies. Now, action cinema is a body centric in that the body within the universe of the film, the laws of physics are constantly set and broken by the protagonist to enhance the heroism of the performer and to immerse the viewer's body itself within the stunts and action sequences of the film. So, this is the reason why people identify so much with that. You say we have been talking about cinematic terms such as suture, where the viewers are almost they almost feel one with the happenings on the screen, okay. And therefore, this is the reason why many youngsters try to imitate the action, the dangerous action scenes which they watch on the cinematic screen. Until about the 90s, action cinema were dominated by men and it was seen as a male bastion. The protagonist was typically a white male who would emerge from the crisis by performing physical feats and stunts, and of course, the great heroes were Bruce Willis, Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Women in such cinema were reduced to few archetypes such as the damsel in distress, but that was also a fact in the western genre, okay. And this is a constant allegation by cinema experts towards the action films led by Amitabh Bachchan, that the idea was, the allegation was that there was nothing for his heroines to do there. His heroines had nothing to do there, okay. It was a one man show and he was a one man army. Most of his action films are all about, and if you watch those movies, some of the greatest films starring Amitabh Bachchan, okay, you will feel that women are just relegated to the sidelines, okay. Mother, however, was an important character in most Bachchan movies. We also talk about action movies, for example, characters of Rika in the Lethal Weapon, the second part, who exists to affirm the heterosexuality of the protagonist. So, you either have a damsel in distress or the prostitute with a golden heart. So, this is the archetypal characters in action films. The bodily integrity of the hero and the male body as a location of security were maintained through such unidimensional characters. However, things started changing, and Bridget Nielsen was one leading lady who posited an interesting challenge to this masculine space, as her androgynous image was complemented by her exaggerated female sexuality, and she acted in action films such as Red Sonja, Cobra and Rocky, the fourth Rocky. Although the female protagonist is relatively new to Hollywood, the action female protagonist, we should also understand the success in of female characters in Hong Kong action movies. While there is an increase in the number of action heroine films of late, especially, the female in the action film is simultaneously being marginalized. Earlier, the hero advanced the narrative while the woman was just a spectator. The male hero in contemporary action picture provides both action as well as spectacle, and the woman is again reduced to motivation for the hero's revenge. Now, there has been, you know, some challenges to the male bastion in action cinema. Films such as Kill Bill, Charlie's Angels and Lara Croft, which are situated in post-feminist societies, they present to the viewer action girls, okay, who are sanitized of their biological and psychological realities. While these films can be seen as progressive in their representation of the female body and its capacity for action, they are also generally heterosexual, they are white and situated within a family. So, they are conventional, but is still unconventional. On the other hand, the end of the millennium saw a series of films. You know, there were a spate of films such as Fight Club and Dark City, also The Matrix, which portrayed a crisis of masculinity. Given the public's engagement with the queer identities, the constructed nature of gender identities were laid bare in these films, especially Fight Club. However, it does not mean that the epic male body is over or the spectacle of it is over. It still continues in films such as Gladiator, but just that a parallel discourse challenging traditional male bodies has already emerged. Now, we have to also think of the 80s. Let us talk about the 80s and the beefed up bodies of Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, as well as Bruce Willis. And now, this has given way to people like let us say Keanu Reeves, Tom Cruise and Nicolas Cage, who are not so beefed up. Okay, so this new set of action heroes like Frank in Transporter, comfortable with making affluent lifestyle choices and even comfortable with dancing so much so that it is even used in a fight sequence. And in Vin Diesel's one of his films, he is seen wearing flamboyant costumes, and the Fast and Furious franchise brought out high speed cars and a certain flavor of metrosexuality through its protagonists. Now, think of films such as Die Hard and especially Live Free or Die Hard, which explore the intra-generational tension between John McClane and Farrell, in which the older hero gets to display his masculinity to a younger, tech-savvy hero. The idea could be that, see, whatever may happen to the modern man and metrosexual man, the old world masculinity still prevails, still dominates. Another way traditional sense of masculinity still persists is through the use of catchphrases for the hero that continue in the Die Hard franchise, the Bond franchise, and also of late in the Expendables franchise. The representation of race is another key theme in action cinema. The kind of racism that exists in action cinema ranges from hegemonic representation of whiteness in contemporary Hollywood films such as City of Joy, which portray the white man as a savior, or through the casual racism present in Transformers. Non-white characters, typically black and Hispanics, are either used as fodder for humor through stereotypes, or they are just treated as sidekicks of the hero, white hero. Now, non-whites in action films are typically portrayed as the fetishized other, taking on roles such as helper, buddy or sole action hero. The advent of action heroes or actors such as Will Smith and The Rock Johnson, Jet Li, Lucy Liu has opened up new types of spaces within action film genres in Hollywood. But despite their emergence, there exists a sort of racism in the way non-white characters are discussed and represented in, and I would urge you to watch Lethal Weapon, the 4th part, to understand race and masculinity in an action movie. Now, coming to more recent blockbuster, Avatar. So, in Avatar, the trope of the non-white character, in this case Trudy Shekin, played by Michelle Rodriguez, she sacrifices herself for the sake of the white man, and this trope continues in this film. And Jake, played by Sam Worthington, stands as a mediator between the savage world and the civilization, and yet it is he who saves the savages out from the conquering race. Now, homosexuality is another angle that is constantly being renegotiated in contemporary Hollywood action cinema, which typically has a heterosexual hegemony. So far, it was a completely white and heterosexual male bastion, but things are changing now. Homosexuality is either used as a comic relief, as in the case of Michael Bay's Bad Boys, the second part, or the demonizing of seemingly homosexual characters in Zack Snyder's 300. In 300, Zemeckis sticks to all the stereotypes of a homosexuality, transvestism, transsexuality, while at the same time glorifying the homoerotic nature and potential of the army of 300 as laid by the character played by Gerard Butler. Similar depictions of homosexuality are also found in The Silence of the Lambs, Watchmen, A Man Apart, etc. Films like Spider-Man second and the third part, they take a more subtle turn as they play on the campness of Peter Parker as being evil, especially in the third part, where there you have the dark, the Spider-Man with dark edges. This is exemplified when he comes into contact with the symbiote. On the other hand, films such as Alexander are comfortable positing the protagonist in a sexual grey area. So, a marked shift in the nature of Hollywood action films occurred after the 9/11 attacks on America. Heroism is enhanced when a hero's violence is meted out in the name of justice, and 9/11 was a new currency through which such heroism could be depicted. Although films such as Black Hawk Down and Fahrenheit 9/11 dealt with the sensitive subject directly, many other more casual references to it are made in films such as Transformers, Iron Man, and War of the World. Okay. While it is important that as you know, as we are interested in cinema, so we love cinema, so as students or cinephiles, to keep in mind the existence of stereotypes and politics within Hollywood action films and also in Hindi action films, we have to understand that no film industry is devoid of politics. Indian films too are full of negative stereotyping, the hero being a fair North Indian heterosexual male, or the villains being darker in color, or crude references to homosexuality are persistent in our cinema as well. While new spaces are being opened up for discussion, it is important to remain alert to the larger political project that action cinemas are part of. So, thank you very much, and we will meet for our next class.